Hi guys, it's Ross here from Tillotson Racing. In this video I'll be assembling the steering system on a Tillotson Mini chassis. I like to start with the steering column first, undo the M8 nut at the bottom and slide it into the bearing on the chassis. It's quite tricky to get the nut back on, but screw it on by hand and then tighten up with a 13mm spanner. The nut at the bottom of the column is now tight. I'm going to attach the steering column support. You have to put the nacio panel brackets on between the chassis tabs and the steering column support, like so, and the other one goes on the other side, and then push the bolt through, put the nut back on and tighten up using a 6mm Allen key and a 13mm spanner. After I've tightened up the steering column support, I can then tighten up the small collars using a 2.5mm Allen key. Tighten the nacio panel safety pin using a 10mm spanner and an 11mm spanner. Tighten the steering boss using a 5mm Allen key and a 10mm spanner. Install the steering wheel and tighten the bolts using a 4mm Allen key and a 10mm spanner. The steering wheel is tight. Now I'm going to move on to putting on the stub axles with the Tillotson laser marking facing up the way. Put on the first spacer on top of the stub axle and then put in the bolt. Then put in the second spacer underneath. This can be a little bit tricky. And then push the bolt down. The stepped washer goes on next, up from the bottom. And then your standard washer and M8 nut. Screw them on and then tighten up using a 5mm Allen key and a 13mm spanner. I've repeated the same process on the left hand side. Now I'm going to put the track rod on. Undo the nut. And this can be a little bit tricky as well. Put one spacer goes on the top and one spacer goes on the bottom. And then push the bolt through, put your washer and your M8 nut back on. And then go over to this side. Tighten them up again with a 5mm Allen key and a 13mm spanner. I've put the track rod on the left hand side as well, following the same process. The next step is to do the tracking. There are a couple of different ways to set the tracking. The most accurate way is to use the laser system. Start by checking the steering wheel is straight. Find the center of a ruler or a straight edge and place it in the center of the bell crank. What we're looking for then is the distance from the end of the ruler to the track rod is equal on both sides. So stand back and visually check that the distance is the same. Once I'm happy the steering wheel is straight, check that the lasers are level using the bubble, which they are, and then line up the dots to the center of the gauge by adjusting the track rod. I have the alignment set where I want it, so using a 12mm spanner This will lock the tie rod in position while you tighten up the M8 nut using a 13mm spanner. Both track rods are tight, and give one last check that the dots stayed in the center of the lasers, and that's all there's to it.